Hello, everyone. I'm Major Garrett in Washington. Welcome to our special coverage of President Trump's address to Congress. In just 4 hours, the president will speak to both chambers, the House and the Senate, invited guests, and quite obviously, a curious global audience. In the speech, he will describe his vision for America's future. There'll be economics in there, immigration, international policy, probably a lot more. Worth reminding ourselves that just 6 weeks ago, Mr. Trump became only the second president in this nation's history to be sworn in for a second non-consecutive term, the other being Democrat Grover Cleveland. And it has been, within the Trump White House, a very busy 6 weeks. Already we have seen dramatic cuts within the size of the federal workforce, set in motion by Elon Musk, and done so with the acceptance and vocal encouragement of the president. There have been a great number of executive orders, more than 70, in fact, and at least for the moment, an order by the president to pause military aid to Ukraine. And just last night, at about midnight, here on the East Coast, sweeping tariffs went into effect against America's 3 largest trading partners, Canada, Mexico, and China. For their part, Canada and China have already launched retaliatory tariffs. The Mexican government has vowed to respond within the week. These actions have, at least for the moment, plunged the United States into what can only be described as a full-blown trade war. The stock market went down today as investors try to figure out just how long this trade conflict will continue. President Trump said these tariffs are necessary to level the economic playing field internationally and here at home. And he also hopes it will encourage Canada, Mexico, and principally China to stop the flow of fentanyl coming in to the United States. I want to start our special coverage with CBS News congressional correspondent Caitlin Huey-Burns on Capitol Hill and CBS News senior White House correspondent Weijia Jiang at the White House. Weijia, let me play for you in the audience something that Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said in remarks after the tariffs went into effect against Canada and Mexico. Let's get that on the, let's listen to that.
Now, it's not in my habit to agree with the Wall Street Journal. But Donald, they point out that even though you're a very smart guy, this is a very dumb thing to do.
Weijia, the reaction at the White House to the tariffs and how they will factor in, if at all, in tonight's address.
Well, I just got out of some source meetings here at the White House, Major, and the president is expected to devote a significant portion of his speech tonight on the economy, and he will talk about tariffs. Of course, he made this decision yesterday on the eve of this massive speech. It's not an accident because he wanted to have key deliverables to show that he is doing things to impact the U.S. economy. Now, whether that is positive or negative, that is not for us to decide. But you can see how the market is reacting. You can see in various studies on consumer confidence that it is having an impact on spending already and on how people perceive the economy. But the president insists that this is necessary because he says this is not just about tariffs. It's about using it as a tool to force our neighbors, Canada and Mexico, to do more on the fentanyl crisis, to stop the flow of that illegal drug into the U.S. But, Major, it's important to note, and it's something that Trudeau himself pointed out, that the amount of fentanyl that comes from our northern border is less than 0.5% of all the fentanyl that comes through into the United States. So he is asking why Canada is still, being punished in this way. Now, what's interesting, Major, is that Trudeau went on to say that, there will be retaliatory tariffs on American exports. And the president posted on Truth Social that if that happens, he's just going to raise the amount of tariffs on Canadian imports. So for you to say that this is pretty much an all-out trade war, Major, is absolutely correct. How that's going to have an impact on the economy, it already is, but the longer-term impact we'll have to see.
Yeah, the Prime Minister said those tariffs on U.S. imports to Canada will be on $150 billion of those, $30 billion up front, and then on $125 billion over time. So it is not a full-blown application of all available tariffs, 25% on everything, but 25% on $30 billion up front, and maybe as many as $150 billion over time. Caitlin Huey-Burns on Capitol Hill, to the degree you found out today, what has been the reaction among Republicans and Democrats?
Well, Major, the president likes to say his favorite word in the dictionary is tariff. He said that over and over on the campaign trail. He said that while he has been president. I can say that that is not the favorite word of most Republicans up here on Capitol Hill. And they're kind of in this difficult position of not wanting to separate themselves from the president very vocally, but they are starting to raise concerns about the impact that this could have on their constituents. We're particularly hearing concerns from Republicans from big farming states, from big manufacturing states, kind of starting to raise their hand and say, look, I'm a little bit concerned about the impact on prices this will have on consumers in my area or on industry in my area. We heard from Senate Majority Leader John Thune today saying, it's no secret that I do not exactly share the sentiment of Trump when it comes to tariffs. However, they are giving him the latitude to use this as a negotiating tactic. And that kind of speaks to the overall theme we've seen from Republicans on Capitol Hill throughout this young presidency so far, is that they have disagreements with the president, but they don't really vocalize them in kind of on hair on fire types of ways, because they also know that their base of supporters are very in line with the president and what he wants to do. So they're giving him time, leeway, and some deference on this, even though it's not really a traditionally conservative standpoint.
Weijia, back to you at the White House. Some developments on the Ukraine front today, and clearly that will be part of the president's speech tonight as well.
Major, I will get to that in a second, but the beauty of live television and breaking news is that you never know when it's going to come. And we just learned that the president's Commerce Secretary, Howard Lutnick, said that as soon as tomorrow there could be an announcement that the U.S. is going to reduce the amount the percentage of tariffs on Canada and Mexico. Of course, it's at 25% now. We don't know what it will be reduced to. We know that he said it's not going to be paused or eliminated, but we do expect that number to go down. We also know that one thing Trump pays a lot of attention to is the stock market. And so this has to be, at least in part, a reaction to those tumbling numbers. Yes, as far as Ukraine and foreign policy goes, that is another big portion of what the president is supposed to talk about tonight. And when I say he wanted to have something to be able to present the American people, that is the pause of Ukrainian aid by the U.S., as the administration says, in their words, contemplates to make sure that any money that goes out is going to go toward a solution. Of course, President Trump has been pushing for a quick ceasefire, and that's not exactly what Volodymyr Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, agreed to. But I will say Zelensky issued a lengthy statement. He stopped short of apologizing, but agreed it was time to get things back on track, Major.
And it might also augur well for the signing of that thing last Friday that was supposed to be signed at the White House, a minerals deal between the United States and Ukraine. We'll keep very close attention to that. That's why we said at the top of the show, investors were curious just how long this trade war would last. It sounds like there's already some reassessment from the Commerce Secretary and the administration. Weijia Jiang at the White House, Caitlin Huey-Burns on Capitol Hill. Thank you very much. I want to bring in our political reporter panel, Jasmine Wright and Daniella Diaz. Jasmine is a politics reporter for NOTUS, and Daniella is a congressional reporter for NOTUS. Remember, NOTUS News of the U.S. So, Jasmine, great to see you. What do you expect in the speech tonight?
Well, we had a report out today that no matter what the substance is, obviously it's about America renewal. The White House says President Trump is going to talk about what he believes are his accomplishments in just these 30-plus days, also kind of level set what the country has gone through the last 4 years and how he views the way forward to change it, to really bring forth his America First agenda. But I think what might be the most interesting part of it is not just what he says, but how he says it. If you remember, Major, when Trump entered the White House in 2017, and he gave his first joint address to Congress, he really was taking kind of a more solemn tone, trying to reintroduce himself to America and say basically to Republicans and Democrats, let's put away the trivial fights. This time around, that is not the Trump that we're going to see. We're going to see what one source told me was an impassioned Trump, one that's not using flowery language, but is talking directly to the Republican Congress and to the American people, basically showing that he is the president and it is his country under his rule, and they basically should acquiesce to what he wants to do.
And the things he is aggressively trying to set in motion and why. Daniella Diaz, you had some interesting reporting about Advice given from senior House Republican leaders to the rank-and-file House Republicans about how they should possibly avoid town halls because in some instances they become a little unruly.
That's exactly right, Major. It was really interesting to hear from these Republicans during that closed-door meeting that took place this morning off campus. It was a political meeting where Richard Hudson, who of course is the NRCC chair, the campaign arm for House Republicans, was telling rank and file to not host in-person town halls because, as we've seen in the last 2 weeks, a lot of these town halls have had disgruntled constituents who have been speaking out against a lot of these cuts that we're seeing coming from Elon Musk, the Trump advisor and billionaire who is part of DOGE and making cuts to the federal government. They've been speaking out. And they also say that instead, maybe they should be holding tele-town halls or Facebook Lives to avoid a lot of the conflict. Now, of course, Republicans pointing to all of these constituents being angry activists from Indivisible, from Move On. Trump, of course, posting on Truth Social that they're actually paid activists. That is, of course, is not clear, but it is an interesting move from leadership to advise Republicans not to have more viral moments that are creating, of course, negative attention for Republicans as they're trying to push their agenda.
And Dale, as I understand it, Elon Musk and House Republicans are going to meet tomorrow evening to hash out some of these matters.
That's exactly right. We are aware that the ultra-conservative caucus, Freedom Caucus members are going to go to the White House and meet with Donald Trump. Now, the biggest thing happening right now on during this State of the Union, or excuse me, joint address, is technically not a State of the Union, but Trump's joint address to the Congress, is that there's a upcoming government funding deadline that they need to address that they still don't have a plan for. And that is, of course, on March 14th, government funding is going to run out, Major, and they're trying to figure out how to get conservatives on board with a continuing resolution or some sort of stopgap measure to fund the government at its current levels so they can continue working on appropriations bills and cutting government funding. So there will be meetings where Donald Trump is going to really try to advise rank-and-file members, conservatives in the conference, to go along with his plan for a CR so that they can work on their priorities. But, of course, important to remember, a lot of them are going to be here tonight, including Elon Musk, who is expected to be in the chamber for the first time with this Republican trifecta. You know, they have the majority in the House and the Senate, so you can really feel the energy here. I'm just outside the House chamber, so even ahead of tomorrow's meeting, we'll be seeing a little bit of that tonight, Major.
Jasmine, to Danielle's point, this is now a speech in part to shift to the legislative part of the mechanics because executive orders have effect. They're meaningful. There have been a lot of them. Trump will speak to all of that. But he's got to turn in a legislative direction to get the other things on his agenda moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, it's incredible, Major. If you think about the fact that so far in office, I mean, he's been in office for 5 weeks, I think. He's already signed over 75 executive orders, eclipsing both his record when he first started in office, Joe Biden's record when he first started in office, really kind of pushing the limits in some respects onto where or how much presidential power he can use. But you're right, it does have to shift into that legislative area. He has often talked about wanting Congress to pass one beautiful big bill that has all of his what he wants to do with his America First agenda, from border security to extending those tax cuts to making sure that some of, trying to keep okay Medicare and Social Security, but still pushing some of the things that he wants to see done. But of course, this Congress is really fractured within the Republican Party, and Democrats have basically said that they do not want to help Trump in any manner so far. And so they're really going to have to lean on all sides of their Republican Party to try to get something passed. And I think it's going to be really, really difficult for them, even though they've kind of passed the first step, which is putting forth that framework through the House.
Jasmine Wright, Danielle Diaz, thank you very much.